He can do two things. The first thing he can do is that he can unilaterally slap tariffs on American companies that move to Mexico and Canada.
Right.
This is a big issue because since the commencement of the NAFTA, 1/4 of American manufacturing jobs, particularly in the auto industry, move out to Mexico and other countries. So a lot of people are hurting in America, especially in the Rust Belts. Michigan,
Detroit, that
Ohio,
area.
Pennsylvania, Detroit. These are the people who voted for Trump. They came out in droves. Now Trump is trying to give back to them what he promised. And of course, over the past 2 months, we saw some aggressive move by the president. First, you had threats against the Carrier, their conditioning company, and then later against Ford to move their businesses to Mexico. And both of them agreed to stay. So these threats of tariffs so far are yielding some results. Now, even GM, General Motors, and Toyota have also been openly threatened by the president. And the president has discussed the possibility of slapping 35% tariff rates. Now, if you're part of NAFTA, supposedly it's a free trade area, no tariffs, zero, right?
Should be zero.
So if you slap 35, then
that's massive.
That's massive.
You'll be out of business.
Now, if he does that, of course, he could go to the court, domestic and international court. Companies in the U.S. could file cases against the U.S. government for violating the contract of the NAFTA. Other countries could also take the United States to international court. There's another thing he could do. He can give 6 months notice to Canada and Mexico and completely withdraw the United States. If he does that, then the trading agreement goes from 0% tariff to 3.5% under the World Trade Organization. He can use different trade acts in 1960s and 1970s to do that by essentially invoking emergency. The idea, he could say, for instance, well, our openness to Mexico has also made us vulnerable to the passage of unsavory characters. He could also use, economic protectionism to protect American jobs and livelihood as the basis for that. But without a question, that could trigger a trade war, and that will make price of a lot of products very high for Americans. Not to mention, I think President Trump doesn't understand. This is not the 1970s and 80s. When we talk about globalization, you're talking about network production. Nothing is really made in one country nowadays. The screen could be made in Samsung. The CPU of your computer could be in one country. The keyboard could be in another country. It's network production. So the idea of bringing back jobs to one country is very much not in tune with the evolution in manufacturing in the past few years. But he made it clear in inauguration. We have two rules under our America First policy. Buy American, hire American. And it seems he really wants to go after that, regardless of what are the physics of manufacturing in the past few years.
I mean, we've seen economists say this as well. The practicality of it, it's bound to hit him in the face. Fine, he'll insist on this. The prices will jack up. Will the American consumers be able to afford them?
This is the problem. He ironically wants to protect the most vulnerable Americans who don't have a job. But the fact of the matter is that if you have trade wars, then the prices of consumer products will go high. Those are the very people who will not maybe able to afford that. And the other issue is this. I mean, giving people a job is one thing, but ensuring they're productive is another thing. It's not just giving job to someone. You have to make sure you maintain productivity. Otherwise, no one else will try to buy from you. Now, something very surreal is happening. First of all, I mean, let's be honest. For a lot of us, we're still internalizing the idea of a president, Donald Trump.
We're still trying to wake up in the morning and think it's not a dream.
It's still trickling in,
Some people think it's a good dream. Some people think it's a nightmare.
And some people were waiting for a plot twist. It didn't happen, my friend.
It
went through.
There's still some people begging for him to resign already, right?
And he's still using his Twitter account. So it seems the guy's not changing. Another surreal thing is happening. China, a technically communist country, is now the vanguard of globalization. So when I was in India, it was coterminous with the World Economic Forum, where Xi Jinping became the first Chinese head of state to talk at a forum for globalization. And he made it very clear, trade wars will not benefit anyone. And in a jab at Mr. Trump, he said, do not blame globalization for your domestic problems. And quote-unquote, locking yourself up in a dark room to keep away air and light is not the way forward. So now you have China making a pitch for free trade and globalization. And this is very important because as Mr. Trump nixed the TPP deal, Australia invited China to join the TPP deal.
China is in a position to jump right in and really benefit from all of this.
Gain the momentum in terms of free trade. So this is just something very interesting and ironic that is happening over the past few days. And remember, this is strange because the TPP was the strategy of Obama to push back against growing Chinese economic preponderance in East Asia. Now China could be the leader of that because they're the biggest economy and the biggest trader in the world. Biggest economy in Asia.
They're already supplying so many industries all over the world. Imagine how much cheaper their supply can be.
Right. If they have free trade agreement.
Yeah.
So something very interesting is happening over there. And so it's double surreal.
Okay.
One, to have Donald Trump as the U.S. president for a lot of people. And second, to have China now becoming the vanguard of globalization.
Okay. I caught one interesting soundbite of Donald Trump after he nixed the TPP. He did say something that we're not anti-trade. We'll still deal with countries, but 1:1.
Yeah.
And he said, we'll deal 1:1. If they screw up on our certain amendments, we'll give them a 30-day warning, and then if they still don't fix it, we'll scrap them. So he's not totally, he kind of clarified, we're not totally isolating himself. We just don't want one-size-fits-all deals, like the TPP, as he said. So will that still somehow make some sense for him?
Well, first of all, let's unpack it. President Donald Trump comes from the Republican Party. And the Republican Party, per tradition, is a pro-free trade party. It's a party of businessmen and rich people.
He's not,
let's be honest.
Purely Republican.
So within his administration, there's a very robust debate, including Rex Tillerson, his foreign secretary pick, who is for the TPP and for free trade. And much of the Congress is for the free trade and is dominated by Republicans. So there's some internal debate. Maybe he's trying to also appease the pro-free trade guy. That don't worry, I'm not just a runaway, unhinged populist. I also care about it. But the second thing is this. For you to have a functioning global free trade regime, you need a sheriff in the town. And that for a long time, for the last 7 decades, has been the United States. If the United States is going to think on one-to-one terms, on purely national interest, insular terms, who's going to guard the global order? This is the problem we have. So even if the U.S. is not anti-globalization but gives off the mantle of sheriffing the global order, that's going to have a lot of ripple effect. And the third thing is this. I mean, even if the thing is this, U.S. is such a big and important country that renegotiating just one trade agreement, whether it's the NAFTA or TP, could have a ripple effect and could make a lot of people scared that this could lead to something else. Not to mention, a lot of countries could also retaliate against the United States. It's not like the U.S. can just snap its finger and the countries will bend over. This is a different century. This is the Asian century. So if the U.S. tries to bully countries along certain trading agreements, they're going to retaliate in their own ways. And most likely, a lot of these countries will gravitate towards China. This is exactly what Japan and Australia, the most important allies of U.S. in this region, are doing right now. Whenever they feel that the U.S. is unreliable, they try to engage with the Chinese further. So they're going to be cause for that. Now, for the Philippines, this is an important thing too. Remember that President Trump said in his inauguration that protectionism could be a basis for prosperity and glory. This is an interesting thing. Now, two things could affect the Philippines. One is that if there'll be a trade war, whether directly or indirectly, we're going to be affected. For instance, let's say he slaps tariffs on Japan and China. That could definitely lead to some recessionary situation in Japan, which is already somehow in a recession, and in China in a dramatic slowdown. Now, if those two giant economies go down, because East Asia is network, we're going to get affected in one way or another, because Japan and China are our top trading partners. So even if he may just go after the big guys, it's going to affect us.
It's going to have a ripple effect.
What if he goes after American companies who are also investing in the Philippines? Luckily, most of the American companies here, in a strange way, are services sector.
They're not manufacturing.
They're not manufacturing.
Exactly.
But at some point, you don't know. This could be a slippery slope whereby it could be any kind of American investment abroad. So you may not know that Americans maybe want to bring the call centers back to some Midwestern states that need job desperately.
If they want